Joseph was in the ghetto, and he got a message from a man called Johannes Bruss, who was a German, whom he had known before the Germans occupied Lithuania. He was horrified to find Joseph in a ghetto, and he wrote him a note, and he said, how can I help you? And Joseph said, only by forming a slave labor brigade in the foundry that you are made a director of, and we'll come and I'll form a brigade and come and work. Johannes said, I can't do a thing like that. Why should you be coming as a slave laborer? I want to help you. Joseph said, that's the best way you can help me. And so it came to pass that Joseph had a brigade which went to this iron foundry, which was in Viljandpole, which is the suburb where the ghetto was. And he went to work, and the slave brigades, in a way, were our line to survival, our safe, because you could bring in food, you could take out bits of stuff that you had left, maybe a skirt or some clothing or whatever, and barter it for bread, for butter, for anything. Joseph then gets to work in the brigade at Johannes Bruss director, which directed iron foundry, and he there meets one of the foremen, somehow attracts him by the way he looks, and they get talking, and his name is Vytautas Rinkevičius. And slowly they develop a relationship, and eventually Vytautas, helps build a little hideout on the loft of the iron foundry by dividing the end of the loft up with a false wall, in which he builds a little thing. Joseph was also allowed to go up and help him, and of course none of it would have been possible without the connivance of Bruss. Bruss was the director of the factory and knew what was going on, but of course didn't let on, as did Garkauskas, who was the bookkeeper, another Lithuanian. There you are, another wonderful Lithuanian, nice German. See, these people exist. I need to point it out again and again. And they built that, and I think quite amusingly, Mr. Bruss, who was the director and who was a Seventh-day Adventist, he was only afraid of God and Hitler, and he used to say to Vytautas openly, when there were some people about, he used to say, now when you go around on your rounds, make sure there aren't any Jews hiding in the factory. So he was protecting himself, you see, to be sure that he pretended he didn't know, but he knew what was going on. And eventually came the day when the hideout was ready, and Joseph got his mother and me to come in the brigade with him, and we got the glimpse of that building, of what was to be our home. And we never went back with the brigade. We stayed there. And slowly, slowly, we had to get used to quite a strange, eerie existence, because we daren't move in the daytime because somebody may hear things and start looking where the noise comes from. So we developed slowly, surely, some sort of routine to be quiet during the day and do things at night. I taught Joseph Russian, he taught me English, and so we had really quite a productive 9 months in a way, but it was difficult and it was stressful, and my mother-in-law particularly was more stressed out. She was older, and she thought she was going to die. She kept saying she was going to die if she had to stay any longer. Anyway, we taught us to organize a little holiday for her. And carved out a little uh, gate in the fence which she could escape from. She could come down at night and go for a week's holiday, live in a normal house, you know, and then she came back. Somebody agreed to harbor her for a week in their house. At the end, we already started hearing that the Allies are advancing. There was no nicer sound than an air raid alarm. That was wonderful. They hadn't quite forgotten. They were still coming, flying over us, and there was hope that the war may end. And so it did. In 1944, in July, the war came to an end. Our war, because it was still carrying on in the rest of Europe. We went for the last few days to Mr. Macenavich's house where my little brother was, and eventually the Soviet troops reached Kaunas and then Williampole, and we were free. Now you know how much freedom should and does mean. But on one hand, there was this euphoric happening that we were now no longer under threat. Our lives seemed to be more or less secured and saved. But at what cost? It was really slowly and very soon it dawned on us the sort of things that had happened. The ghetto was burned down by the Germans before they retreated. I found out about my father's death, found somebody who, we were told that he was somewhere working in Germany. Somebody said even that they had seen a note from him that he was sorting some archives in Prussia for the Germans, which was all invented. Now, how subtle were the Germans to even invent rumors that these people were still alive. My father was killed in the first days of the occupation in the now quite infamous massacre in Lietuv's garage. I think it was at least as stressful coming out as being in, because the enormity of what had happened while we were in hiding was totally upsetting. Upsetting is the wrong word, I don't know. It was traumatic, really. But I still didn't know what happened to my mother, for instance. I didn't know till we got to Poland, and when I met some people who had been in the same camp as her and who got liberated from the camp, and they had survived, and my mother hadn't. She had committed suicide in the camp in November. She always said that if she couldn't stand it anymore, she wouldn't go on. So I learned about my mother's death. There was still sort of, because there were people coming from the camps, and I sort of had these hopes and visions. But these were personal hopes, but also there were national disasters. You know, we heard about all sorts of things. We learned about the extermination, about the gas chambers, never mind our own ghetto. So it was not a nice time. So that was the end of the hideout, the tragic end of the hideout. Our personal end was a good one on a narrow scale, but on a wider horizon, it was on a wider scale, it was quite horrific to find out.